Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up our Scratch and go to Create. We're going to create a new game, and we always want to name our games right away so we know what we're creating. So I'm going to name this First Scroll because we're talking about our scrolling and how to get scrolling. So we're going to call this First Scroll. So I'm going to call this First Scroll. The first thing that we're going to do here is I always like to have my students share this with me. Your teacher may tell you share right away so that they can see it. Your teacher can't see your project until you've shared it. So by sharing it right away, you make it visible so that your teacher in the class can see it. So what I'm going to do is I've shared my project so my teacher can see it. I'm going to go back in. I'm going to get rid of Scratch Cat. We're going to add a sprite. And what we want to do, the goal here is we're going to make it look like our background is moving. So what we're going to do is first we're going to add a sprite. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for walk. I'm going to use the term walk. And this is going to give me sprites that have costumes that show them walking. So this would be Avery walking. The bear doesn't really walk. He stands up. But this bear walks. Giga. And I'm going to go with Pico. So we'll do Pico. And I'm going to move Pico down here just kind of out of the way a little bit. Now, the first thing we want to do is the goal of this is we want to make it so it looks like it's scrolling through, that we're moving through the environment. Now, first thing you need to know is your backdrops don't ever move. There's no motion with backdrops. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to create our own sprites. We're going to go to Paint Brushes, and we're going to go to Paint, and we're going to create our background. For this one, we're just going to create we're walking through a field or a town or something like that. So we're going to make just like the ground and then the open air. So I'm going to start by making the ground, which I think would be like a grassy area. So I'm going to turn this, make this into a nice green using my colors. And what I want to do is I also want to turn off the outline. So I'm going to put a red line through the outline. We don't want to outline my shapes. We want it to look fluid because we don't want there to be any lines. And it'll make sense here, and you'll see how in a second. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my box for the ground. And what you want to do is you want to go to the edges. You see the little edges there, and that's going to be your viewable area. So I'm going to bring this over and I'm going to get it right to the edge here. It takes a little bit. Bring this right to the bottom. So we've got it. Okay, so then what I want to do is I want to kind of set up. I'll move this down just a little bit. Okay, so we've got the ground here. And then I'm going to add the open air space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my color here again, make this into a nice blue for blue sky. Oh, I changed the wrong color. Hold on here. I'm going to change this back, my grass. There's my grass. So I'm going to go back out of here. All right, now I'm going to change my color to something else. So I'm going to get my blue sky. Here, that looks like some blue sky. I'm going to create a new box here to fill in the rest of my environment. So I'm going to bring this across. So I'm going to get the rest of my environment. So I'm going to bring this down so that they meet. Bring this over just a little bit so that it gets right to the edge. And this is going to take a little playing with when we get done here. Hopefully we got it right. We'll see how this looks. But there's going to be what my background is going to look like. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this back one, because this is going to be my background one. Okay. So I'm going to hit save. So I've got it as back one. So now in our background, we're going to put some code in here. So we're going to go back into our code. And what we're going to do is we're going to put some code in here. And I'm going to go into my code. And the first thing I'm going to do is on start, I want to set it so that my backdrop goes right to the middle of the screen. So I'm going to move, not my backdrop, my sprite. So my sprite backdrop, I'm going to have it go to X0, Y0. So it's going to go to the point of origin. So my sprite background is always going to be at the beginning. So when I hit my green start button, it moves right to the background. Now you notice you can't see my Pico sprite. And so what we are going to do is we have to change, so your sprites can go in layers, and you have lots of, you can send, you send different things. You can put things on top of each other and have different layers of it. So what we want to do is with our looks, we want to make sure that this sprite goes to the background. So what we want to do is we're going to go to Sprite, and we are going to say where under their move, go to back layer is what we're looking for. So we're looking for my go to right here. And what we want to do is we want to say go to the back layer. Okay. So again, I hit my start button. Now it goes to the back layer and I can see my Pico sprite. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to make a forever loop, because just like we've done before, when you move your sprites, you're going to create a loop for them. So I'm going to create a forever loop. I'm going to move this sprite, and if I want mine is going to scroll left to right. So or it's going to scroll from the right going to the left. So he's walking to the right. So what I would do is change my motion using our coordinate grids. I'm going to change my motion by changing my X. Now you could just as easily change your background going up and down by changing your Y grid coordinate. So I'm going to change my X grid coordinate by -5. Okay. So then when I go through and I hit the play button, you can see that my background is moving to the edge. Now, we've already talked a little bit about this, but what happens is when we get to the edge, our program doesn't know what to do once we get to the edge. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to say, what are we going to do with our X position? So I'm going to drag my X position block in here, and any block I click on it, it tells me what my current X position is. My current X position of this sprite, because I'm in, is -464. So what we want to do is we're going to put in our if-then statement. So we're going to do our if this happens, then this. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in an if-then. I'm going to drop this if-then in here, and I'm going to say, okay, if my X position, remember we're going to do our operators here, is less than this, we're going to do something else. So I'm going to put this in here, put my less than symbol. If my X position is less than, now I don't want to do this exact to 464 because I want to catch a little sooner. So I'm going to do -460. So if my X position is less than -460, I want it to go all the way back over to the right, right? So if I can move my sprite, and I can move it all the way over to the right, and I can see what that X position is. Oh, let me stop this. If I move this X position all the way to the right, I can see that my X position could be just the same. So instead of having a -460, I can move it all the way to the right and see it's +460. So what I'm going to say is if it gets to the -460, I want to have it go to +460x. So I'm going to have it go to, we'll have it go to 460. And then I want to keep my Y still 0 because I'm not moving my up and down. I'm moving just my left and right. So now when I hit the play button, my sprite gets all the way to the edge, goes back to the beginning, comes back to the edge. Okay, so now you've got a moving background, but it doesn't look realistic. We don't have it looking realistic. So what we want to do is we're going to make it and fill in the gaps to make it look realistic. Okay, so now here's how we do this. We're going to duplicate this sprite. So when we duplicate the sprite, it's going to duplicate the code and everything in it. So I'm going to right click on backdrop 1, and I'm going to hit the duplicate button. And this is going to give me, now it's called back 2. Now I'm highlighted, I'm in backdrop 2. Now you can see how they don't look the same because they're just here, and backdrop 2 is doing its own thing. So what I want to do is there's only a couple of things that we're going to change in this code for backdrop 2. What I'm going to change in backdrop 2 is I'm going to start my XY position. I want this one to, so this one starts at my first backdrop starts at 0, 0, or my first sprite. I'm going to start my second one at 460, 0. So it's all the way to the right, ready to come in. And it's going to be on the back layer. It's going to move in, And when it gets to the negative 460, we're going to add here. So what we're saying is I start one right at the center of the screen, and then my next one, I'm going to start off to the far right. So now when I hit my stop button and start, I should see that my background is scrolling. Now, if you did it right, it shouldn't look like anything because I've got it. And this actually really worked out well for me because you can't tell that my screen is moving, but it's moving, right? And one way to know that it's moving is I'm going to go into my backdrop one, right? And I'm going to put a costume on here. And I'm going to draw a tree in here real fast. So I'm going to make myself a little red tree real fast. So I'm going to just put this little tree leaf in here. And now we've got it going. So as you see my screen scrolling across, there is my backdrop.